The pregnant woman froze, her breath catching in her throat. The German Shepherd, a magnificent creature of muscle and controlled energy, was barking directly at her, not a playful yap, but a deep, guttural bark that vibrated through the air, laced with an urgency that sent shivers down her spine. She took a shaky step back, one hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly, a protective gesture against the unseen threat. "Please, make him stop," she pleaded, her voice trembling, her eyes darting around desperately for help. But Rex, the German Shepherd, didn't back down. He growled low in his chest, a rumble of pure instinct, his muscles coiled and tense, ready to spring. His gaze was locked on her, unwavering, intense, as if she were concealing something dangerous, something malevolent. Mark, Rex's handler and a seasoned security officer, exchanged a worried look with the other officers nearby. He knew Rex. He'd worked with him for years. Rex wasn't acting on mere impulse. He was a highly trained K-9 unit, honed to detect threats invisible to the human eye. Drugs, explosives, danger lurking beneath the surface. But this felt different. Was it possible? Could this visibly pregnant woman, her face etched with fear, actually be carrying something illegal? Was she truly a threat? A nearby officer, a tall, imposing man with a stern face that brooked no argument, stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm, authoritative, "we need to ask you a few questions." The woman's face drained of color, turning ashen white. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice trembled, a thread of panic weaving its way through her words. Around them, the usual airport bustle faded into hushed whispers. Passengers, caught in the unexpected drama, became an impromptu audience, their eyes darting nervously between the distressed woman and the relentlessly barking dog. Some faces reflected suspicion, mirroring the officer's initial concerns. Others showed concern, a flicker of empathy for the visibly pregnant woman caught in this unsettling situation. Mark hesitated, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Was this a terrible misunderstanding? A false alarm triggered by some unknown scent? Or was Rex, with his superhuman senses, detecting something that everyone else was blind to? He knew he had to trust his partner. Rex's instincts had saved lives before. Swallowing his doubt, Mark made the call. "We need to take her in for further screening," he stated, his voice firm despite the uncertainty churning within him. Whatever was happening, whatever Rex was sensing, they had to find out, and they had to find out fast. Two uniformed officers, their movements practiced and efficient, gently but firmly, escorted the pregnant woman towards a private security screening room. Her breaths were quick and shallow, ragged gasps of air that did little to calm her rising panic. Her hands, trembling visibly, remained clutched protectively around her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from some unseen danger. "Please," she begged again, her voice barely audible above a whisper, laced with a desperate plea for understanding. I don't know what's happening." Mark followed closely behind, Rex at his heel, the German Shepherd still a picture of focused intensity. Rex refused to calm down, his sharp, intelligent eyes remaining relentlessly locked onto the woman, his powerful body coiled tight, like a spring wound to its breaking point. Mark had never witnessed his canine partner this persistent, this singularly focused before. Inside the sterile, brightly lit screening room, an officer began to carefully search the woman's meager belongings, meticulously emptying her bag onto the stainless steel table. Another officer, his expression neutral but watchful, prepared to conduct a full body scan. The cold, impersonal technology, a stark contrast to the raw emotion filling the small room. "Do you have any medical conditions we should know about?" a female officer asked, her tone softer now, tinged with a hint of concern. The woman shook her head, her eyes wide and frightened. No, I mean, I'm 7 months pregnant, that's all." Her voice wavered, cracked with uncertainty, as if even that simple statement was now in question. Meanwhile, outside the closed door of the screening room, Rex paced back and forth, a restless energy radiating from him. He whined softly, a low, mournful sound that tugged at Mark's gut and scratched urgently at the unyielding metal door, desperate to get back to the woman inside. Mark frowned, his unease deepening into genuine alarm. This wasn't normal. If she wasn't carrying drugs, explosives, or any other illegal substance, then what in God's name had Rex detected? An uneasy silence settled over the screening room, broken only by the rustling of plastic gloves and the woman's shallow, rapid breaths. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Sarah gasped, a sharp intake of air that sounded like a sob. Her hands flew to her stomach, clutching at her abdomen with a desperate, clawing grip. A look of stark shock, quickly morphing into agonizing pain, flashed across her face. Something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. The room fell silent, all pretense of routine security forgotten. Sarah's face contorted, her features twisting in a mask of agony. She let out a sharp, choked gasp, her hands now digging into her belly as if trying to hold herself together from the inside. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible, yet somehow filling the suddenly silent room with dread. Beads of sweat popped out on her forehead, glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights, and her breathing grew labored, shallow, punctuated by ragged intakes of air. Jake's instincts, honed by years of emergency response training, kicked in. "Get medical assistance now!" He barked at one of the officers, his voice sharp with command. Sarah's legs buckled beneath her, betraying her. She collapsed heavily into a nearby chair, her body racked with tremors, shaking uncontrollably. Her panic was palpable, radiating off her in waves. But beneath the panic, Jake saw something else, something primal, something raw, pure, unadulterated fear. Outside the room, Shadow whined again, louder this time, and scratched at the door with renewed urgency, his usual focused alertness replaced by a clear, unmistakable distress. Jake had never, ever seen his canine partner react this way. The officer, who had been searching her bag, his face pale, stepped back, momentarily frozen, his eyes wide with dawning uncertainty. Is she going into labor?" he muttered, the question hanging in the air, heavy with unspoken fear. Sarah shook her head violently, a frantic, desperate denial. "No, no, it's too early," she gasped, wincing, as another sharp, agonizing pain ripped through her. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision, streaming down her face. "Please, help me!" Just then, as if summoned by her desperate plea, a paramedic team rushed into the room, pushing through the startled security personnel. Paramedic Davis, the lead medic, his movements swift and decisive, knelt beside her, his voice calm and reassuring amidst the growing chaos. "Ma'am, stay with me," he instructed gently, his eyes scanning her rapidly, assessing the situation. "We need to get you to a hospital immediately." Jake's heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. This wasn't just about airport security anymore. This was about something far more profound, far more critical. This was about saving two lives, teetering on the brink. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, their movements a blur as they checked Sarah's vitals, their expressions growing increasingly grim. "Her pulse is erratic," Paramedic Davis murmured urgently, his voice tight with concern. "We need to move now." As they prepared to lift her onto a stretcher, Shadow suddenly lunged forward, straining against his leash, sniffing the air with renewed, frantic intensity. His ears flattened against his head, and he let out a low, uneasy growl, a sound of deep-seated warning that resonated through the room. Jake's stomach twisted into a cold knot. Something was still wrong. Just then, Paramedic Davis, his brow furrowed in concentration, noticed something strange. "Wait," he said, his voice sharp, his eyes narrowing with focused attention. He carefully pressed his hand against Sarah's distended abdomen, his fingers gently probing, feeling for any telltale signs of fetal movement. A moment stretched into an eternity. Then he froze, his eyes widening in dawning horror. "This isn't just early labor," he stated, his voice low, grave. "Something else is happening. Something serious." Sarah's breathing became ragged, shallow gasps for air that seemed to bring her no relief. Her face was now paper white, tears silently slipping down her cheeks, leaving tracks in the sweat. "I don't know what's wrong," she whispered again, her voice breaking, raw with pain and terror. "Please, just help my baby." Jake clenched his fists, his knuckles white. Shadow had sensed danger long before anyone else in the room. He'd been barking a warning they'd all misinterpreted. But what exactly had he detected? What invisible threat had his incredible senses picked up? The answer came in a chilling moment of revelation. Paramedic Davis turned to Jake, his face grim, his eyes filled with a stark urgency. "There's an internal rupture," he stated flatly, the words hanging heavy in the air. "If we don't get her into surgery now, both she and the baby, they won't make it." Jake's blood ran cold, the air suddenly thin and difficult to breathe. Shadow hadn't been wrong. He hadn't been detecting a threat to security. He had been trying to save their lives. The airport erupted into controlled chaos. Paramedics, their voices sharp with urgency, rushed Sarah towards the waiting ambulance, their movements a blur of coordinated action. Jake and Shadow ran alongside them, weaving through the stunned passengers who had stopped in their tracks, their faces a mixture of shock and concern, watching the unfolding drama. Sarah's breaths were now frighteningly shallow, her eyes fluttering weakly, as if she were teetering on the very edge of consciousness. "Stay with us," Paramedic Davis urged, his voice strained but determined, gripping her hand tightly. "We're almost there." Shadow, normally the epitome of steady composure, whined anxiously, a high-pitched sound of pure distress, his intelligent eyes never leaving Sarah's face. It was as if he understood the gravity of the situation, the precarious balance between life and death. Jake felt a lump rise in his throat, thick with emotion. Had it not been for Shadow, for his unwavering insistence, they never would have known. They would have dismissed it as stress, as early labor, and precious time would have slipped away. As the paramedics carefully lifted her onto the ambulance gurney, Sarah turned her head slightly, her lips trembling, forming words with immense effort. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze locking directly onto Shadow, a silent acknowledgement of the life-saving intervention. Shadow let out a low, comforting whimper, a soft rumble of reassurance, his body still tense with anticipation. Jake reached down, giving Shadow a firm, reassuring pat on his head. "You did good, buddy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a resounding thud, and within seconds it sped away, sirens blaring, a desperate cry slicing through the afternoon air. But as Jake watched it disappear into the distance, swallowed by the urban landscape, one agonizing question still haunted him, a chilling uncertainty that clung to him like a shroud. Would she and her baby make it in time? Hours passed, each one stretching into an eternity, heavy with anxiety. Jake sat outside the hospital, on a cold, hard bench, Shadow by his side, his fingers running absently through the dog's thick fur. The German Shepherd had finally calmed, his earlier agitation replaced by a quiet watchfulness, though his ears still perked up at every passing sound, every approaching footstep. Jake understood. Shadow was waiting for news, just like he was. Finally, the automatic hospital doors swung open with a soft whoosh, and Dr. Lee approached, his face unreadable at first, an impenetrable mask of professional neutrality. Jake's stomach tightened into a painful knot, but then slowly, almost imperceptibly, a small, tentative smile appeared on Dr. Lee's lips, breaking through the tension. "She made it," he said, his voice low but filled with quiet relief. "Both mother and baby are stable." Jake exhaled, a rush of air leaving his lungs, a physical release of the crushing weight he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. "Thank God," he muttered, his voice hoarse, glancing down at Shadow. The German Shepherd's tail thumped softly against the concrete, a small but significant gesture, as if he, too, understood the wave of relief washing over them. Dr. Lee hesitated for a moment before continuing, his expression turning thoughtful. "There was an undetected internal rupture," he explained, shaking his head in disbelief. "If she hadn't gotten medical attention when she did, she and the baby simply wouldn't have survived." He paused, looking at Shadow with a newfound respect. "I don't know how your dog sensed it," he admitted, his voice filled with awe, "but he saved her life." Just then, Nurse Emily stepped forward, approaching Jake with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "This is for you," she said softly, handing him the note, from Sarah. It was a simple, hastily scribbled message, only a few words, but they were enough to make Jake's throat tighten with emotion. "Tell the dog, he's my angel. If you were moved by this incredible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an amazing tale like this. Stay with us for more heartwarming and unbelievable stories."